I don't even know where to start with this, but I'll just say it. My best friend's husband, let's call him Aaron, just told my wife that he's in love with her. And now, my entire world feels like it's crumbling. It started yesterday when my wife, Sophie, mentioned something strange. She said Aaron had texted her out of the blue, asking if she could meet him for lunch. She thought maybe it was about his marriage to Lena, my best friend and the mother of his kids. Do you think they are having problems? Sophie asked me, a worried crease on her forehead. Maybe he needs advice from a woman's perspective. Now, I found it odd. Aaron had never reached out to Sophie like this before. Sure, they were friendly, we were all close, but a one-on-one lunch invite. It felt off. But I didn't want to be paranoid. Just go, I told her. See what he wants. The next morning, as Sophie was getting ready, she brought it up again. I have no idea what this is about, she said, slipping on her shoes. Maybe he's planning something for Lena and needs my help. I shrugged it off, but something about it didn't sit right with me. A few hours later, while I was at work, I got the call. Sophie's voice was shaky. You are not going to believe what just happened, she said. At the restaurant, Aaron had been acting nervous, barely touching his food. Then, he just said it. He told her she was the most incredible woman he had ever met, that he had been in love with her for years and that he couldn't hold it in anymore. He said if she gave him a chance, he'd leave Lena right now. My wife was stunned. She told him, flat out, that he was crazy and that she loved me, her husband. But he just kept talking. He said he had felt this way from the moment he met her. That he had been suppressing it for years, waiting for the right moment. Sophie stood up and walked out. She called me immediately. While she was on the phone, the texts from Aaron started. At first, they were apologies. Then, excuses. He claimed it was just a fleeting infatuation, a mistake. But the damage was already done. When Sophie got home, she showed me everything. The messages, the missed calls. I told her to answer one while I listened in. Aaron was sobbing. He begged her not to tell Lena. He kept saying he had misread signals, that he thought she had feelings for him too. He swore up and down that it was only her, that he had never cheated on Lena before. I was done. I took the phone and told him we'd talk tomorrow. Then I hung up. Now we are sitting in our living room, staring at each other, trying to figure out what to do. Sophie thinks we should drive over to Lena's house right now and tell her. But all I can think about is what this will do to their family. They have 2 little kids. This is going to destroy them. I know we have to tell her. But I also know that even if she doesn't leave him, our relationship with them will never be the same. And then there's my wife. It's not her fault. But I can already imagine the way this will ripple through our entire family. The judgment, the whispers, how the hell do we handle this? I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined Aaron sitting across from my wife, pouring his heart out like some tragic hero in a bad romance movie. Only this wasn't fiction. This was real. And it was tearing my world apart. Sophie lay beside me, staring at the ceiling. I knew she wasn't sleeping either. She shifted restlessly, her breathing uneven. Are you awake? She finally whispered. Yeah, I muttered. She turned to me, her face barely visible in the dim light. I don't know what to do, she admitted. I don't want to ruin Lena's life, but we have to tell her, right? I sighed, running a hand through my hair. Yeah. We do. Telling Lena meant detonating a nuclear bomb in their marriage. But what was the alternative? Keep quiet. Let Aaron believe he could get away with this. Let him continue to harbor this obsession with Sophie. No. That wasn't an option, but what really made my stomach turn was a single thought I hadn't voiced out loud yet. What if this wasn't the first time? What if Aaron had done this before? What if Sophie wasn't the only woman he had fixated on? That thought gnawed at me as we finally drifted into a restless sleep. The morning after, the next morning, before I even had a chance to process everything, my phone rang. It was Lena. My stomach dropped. I picked up, forcing my voice to sound normal. Hey, what's up? Lena sounded off. Her voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear something lurking beneath it. Anger. Sadness. Fear. We need to talk, she said. Can you and Sophie come over? Now? Shit. I glanced at Sophie, who was already sitting up, her face pale. She could hear the tension in my voice. Yeah, I said, swallowing hard. We'll be right there. The setup, the drive to their house was tense. Sophie was gripping her phone so tightly her knuckles were white. You think he told her first? She asked. Maybe, I said. Or maybe she found out some other way. My mind raced with possibilities. Had she gone through his phone? Had Aaron broken down and confessed in a last-ditch effort to spin the story? By the time we pulled into their driveway, my heart was pounding. Lena was waiting for us on the porch. Her arms were crossed, her jaw clenched. Aaron stood behind her, looking like absolute hell, unshaven, eyes bloodshot, shoulders slumped. This wasn't going to be good. The accusation. As soon as Sophie and I stepped out of the car, Lena turned to my wife, her eyes burning with accusation. How could you? For a second, I thought I had misheard. Sophie froze. What? Aaron looked away, rubbing his face like a man who'd already lost everything. Lena's voice cracked. I trusted you, Sophie. It hit me like a freight train. Aaron had flipped the story. I grabbed Sophie's hand, squeezing it tightly as she stammered, Lena, no, but Lena wasn't listening. He told me everything, she hissed. That you tried to seduce him. That you've been coming on to him for years. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Sophie recoiled like she'd been slapped. Are you serious right now? I stepped forward, forcing my voice to stay calm. Lena, that's not what happened. He's lying to you. She let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. Oh really? Then explain why he has dozens of texts from her. All the little inside jokes. The late-night messages. I turned to Sophie, who looked like she might actually throw up. You text him? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Not like that, she said desperately. It was never like that. Just dumb conversations, family stuff, group chats. I never flirted with him. Lena's eyes were shining with unshed tears. Then why would he say you did? I looked at Aaron, my hands curling into fists. Because he's trying to save his own ass. Aaron flinched but didn't say a word. I pulled out my phone. You want to see proof? I have proof. I heard what he said to Sophie last night. He confessed everything. Lena wavered, uncertainty flickering across her face. What? Sophie swallowed hard, reaching for her own phone. And I have his messages. Here. Read them yourself. Lena hesitated. I could see her struggling, torn between loyalty to her husband and the overwhelming evidence against him, but then, just as she reached for Sophie's phone, Aaron snapped. You're gonna believe them over me? He demanded, his voice was raw, desperate. He was losing control. Lena froze. Aaron was rarely the angry type. He was always calm, collected. But now, he was unraveling in front of us. You want to know the truth? He spat, his voice shaking. Fine. You want to hear it? I do love Sophie. I have for years. And yeah, maybe I lied to you just now, but you know what? It doesn't even matter, because you're never gonna forgive me anyway. Lena looked like she had just been punched in the stomach. The world seemed to go silent. Aaron was breathing heavily, his hands on his knees, like he had finally unloaded a weight he couldn't carry anymore. Lena slowly turned to look at me. You knew, she whispered. I nodded, my throat dry. We were going to tell you today. Silence. Then, without warning, Lena took off a wedding ring and threw it at Aaron's feet. Get out. Aaron's head snapped up. Lena, get out. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't scream. But her words cut through the air like a knife. Aaron didn't move. So I stepped forward. You heard her. He finally looked at me. And in that moment, I saw it. He wasn't sorry. He wasn't ashamed. He was just lost. For years, he had built this fantasy in his head. And now, it was crumbling. Without another word, he turned and walked inside. Lena stood there, shaking, staring at the door he had just disappeared through. Then, without warning, she burst into tears. Sophie caught her before she collapsed. I looked at my wife, my best friend sobbing in her arms, and realized this wasn't over. This was just the beginning. Lena was shaking in Sophie's arms, her body racked with sobs. I had never seen her like this before. She was always the strong one, the one who kept it together. But right now, she looked broken. I stood there, fists clenched, my heart hammering in my chest. Inside that house was Aaron, the man who had just tried to ruin my marriage and was now standing in the wreckage of his own. We had thought this was over. That he would pack his bags and leave. That Lena would throw him out and move on, but we were wrong, this was just getting started. Aaron's last plea. The silence was thick as Lena pulled away from Sophie, wiping her tear-streaked face. She turned, eyes burning with fury, and stormed into the house. Sophie hesitated, glancing at me, and I nodded. "Stay with her," I said. "I'll deal with Aaron." Sophie followed Lena inside, but I stayed on the porch for a second, taking a deep breath before stepping in. Aaron was in the living room, standing with his hands on his head, pacing like a caged animal. When he saw me, he let out a bitter laugh. "You happy now?" he muttered. I wanted to hit him. I wanted to knock him flat on his ass for everything he had done. But instead, I kept my voice even. "You did this to yourself." He scoffed. "You don't understand." "Understand what?" I snapped. "That you've been obsessed with my wife for years. That you lied to your own wife to save your ass. What exactly am I supposed to understand?" Aaron ran a hand through his hair, his breathing uneven. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." "Oh, really? How was it supposed to happen, Aaron?" He exhaled sharply, rubbing his face. "I don't know, man. I thought maybe she felt something too." I stepped closer. "She didn't. She never did." Aaron shook his head like he refused to believe it. "You don't get it. It wasn't just some dumb crush. It was real. It is real." I felt rage boiling inside me. "Real? You think what you did was real love?" Aaron's eyes darkened. "More real than what you have with her." That was it. I grabbed him by the shirt and slammed him against the wall. "You don't talk about my marriage," I growled. "You don't get to sit here and act like you're the victim." For the first time, Aaron looked afraid. "You're gonna leave," I said. "You're gonna walk out that door, and you're never coming near my wife again." Aaron's jaw tightened. "What about Lena?" "That's her decision," I snapped. "Not yours." Just then, Lena stormed into the room, her face twisted with rage. "Pack your things," she said coldly. "And get out." Aaron turned to her, desperate. "Lena, please," she held up a hand. "Stop." Aaron hesitated. Then, finally, he let out a shaky breath and walked upstairs to pack. The second he was out of sight, Lena collapsed onto the couch, her face buried in her hands. Sophie sat beside her, rubbing her back gently. I sat across from them, running a hand down my face. "We need to make sure he stays gone," I said. Lena looked up, her eyes red and puffy. "He's not going to let this go, is he?" I didn't answer. Because I wasn't sure. A darker discovery. Aaron left that night. He packed a duffel bag, didn't say goodbye to his kids, and just left. Lena didn't even watch him go. She just stood in the kitchen, gripping the counter like it was the only thing keeping her upright. But even though he was gone, something about this still felt wrong. Sophie and I stayed with Lena for hours, making sure she was okay. It wasn't until well past midnight that she finally spoke again. "I need to know everything," she said suddenly. Sophie frowned. "What do you mean?" Lena straightened, a dangerous determination in her eyes. "I need to see if there's more." Then, before we could stop her, she walked to the office and turned on Aaron's computer. My stomach twisted. "Are you sure you want to do this right now?" I asked carefully. Lena didn't even look at me. "I have to." She sat down, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she typed in his password. On the third attempt, she got in. A part of me wanted to tell her to stop. To wait. But deep down, I knew there was more, and I was right, because what Lena found, it changed everything. The hidden folder. Lena clicked through Aaron's files quickly, her hands shaking. Most of them were normal, work documents, family photos. But then she found a folder. It was buried deep, hidden inside another folder labeled work stuff. The name of the hidden folder? Sophie. Sophie's breath hitched. No, Lena clicked it open, and there they were, hundreds of photos of Sophie. Some from family gatherings. Some from vacations. Some that she had no idea had been taken. There were even candid shots of her at the grocery store, walking to her car, laughing with me at barbecues. I felt sick. Sophie covered her mouth with her hands. Oh my god, Lena kept scrolling, her face pale. This isn't just a crush, she whispered. This is an obsession. Then, at the very bottom of the folder, there was a video file. None of us moved. None of us breathed. Then, slowly, Lena double-clicked it. The screen went black for a second. Then the video started playing. It was grainy, like it had been recorded secretly. Then, a familiar voice filled the speakers. Aaron's voice, and the words he said, they made my blood run cold. I know it's wrong, he whispered in the recording. But I can't help it. I love her. And I know she loves me too. It's only a matter of time before she realizes it. Sophie let out a choked sob. Lena slammed the laptop shut. This is sick, she whispered. I clenched my fists so tightly my nails dug into my palms. We weren't just dealing with a betrayal. We were dealing with a man who had completely lost touch with reality. And suddenly, I had a terrifying thought. Aaron had left, but what if he came back? And what if, this time, he wasn't just looking for answers? The room was silent except for Sophie's shaky breathing. The glow from the laptop screen cast eerie shadows across Lena's face as she sat frozen, her fingers still resting on the trackpad. No one spoke. No one could. Aaron's voice from that video still echoed in my head. I know it's wrong, but I can't help it. I love her. And I know she loves me too. It's only a matter of time before she realizes it. My stomach twisted. This wasn't just some misguided crush. This was something far darker. Sophie pulled her hands away from her mouth. He's been recording me, she whispered. Her voice was barely there, like she was afraid to even say it out loud. How long has he been doing this? Lena clenched her jaw, clicking through more folders. We are gonna find out. But deep down, I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. Digging into his secrets, Lena scrolled through the folders, her face blank but her hands trembling. The pictures weren't just from our group gatherings or vacations. Some of them were taken at our house. Aaron had been watching Sophie for years. The thought made me sick. Suddenly, Lena gasped. Oh my god. What? I asked. She turned the laptop toward me and Sophie. On the screen was a diary entry. A document, simply titled Future Plans. I swallowed hard. Lena clicked it open. The moment I saw the words on the screen, my blood ran ice cold. Future plans entry #1. I don't know how much longer I can take this. Seeing her with him every day, pretending it doesn't kill me. But I have a plan. I have to. I've been patient. I've waited. But I can't wait anymore. She doesn't see it yet, but she's mine. I know she's unhappy with him. I see it in her eyes. The way she laughs, but it doesn't reach her face. The way she looks at him, empty. She deserves passion. She deserves to be worshipped. So I'll give her that. First, I need to create distance between them. Subtle, at first. Make her start questioning things. Make her see what I see. Once the cracks are there, I'll be ready. I just have to wait for the right moment, and when it comes, I won't hold back, because love like this, it's worth any cost. I felt physically ill. Sophie turned away, squeezing her eyes shut like she could erase what she had just read. He was planning to ruin our marriage, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Lena sat back, exhaling shakily. He's delusional. I clenched my fists. He was manipulating us. All of us. Sophie shook her head, her voice unsteady. I never even thought he's dangerous, Lena interrupted. This isn't just a pathetic crush. He's obsessed. And we don't know what else he's capable of. I turned back to the screen. There has to be more. And there was, because Aaron had documented everything, every conversation he'd had with Sophie. Every time they'd spoken, texted, or even been in the same room together. He had twisted every single interaction into something romantic in his mind. Entry #12 tonight. She touched my arm. Just for a second. But I know what it meant. It's happening. She's starting to feel it too. My breathing grew heavier. That never happened, Sophie whispered. He was seeing what he wanted to see, Lena muttered. Not reality. Sophie shook her head violently. No. I remember that night. We were at the barbecue at your house, Lena. I touched his arm because he had something on his shirt. That's it. That's all it was. But in Aaron's mind, it was something else. A sign. A confirmation of his delusion, and I suddenly had the sickening realization that this wasn't just something Aaron had been thinking about. He had been acting on it. He had been waiting for the right moment to make his move, and now that we had found all this, I wasn't sure he'd just walk away. A disturbing twist. Lena's hands were shaking as she clicked open another document. This one was different, because this wasn't just about Sophie, this was about me. Entry #26 I need him gone. I've thought about every possible way to do it. Every way I can break them apart. Option 1, make him doubt her. Plant little seeds of jealousy. It would be so easy. I've been laying the groundwork for years. Option 2, push him away from her. Convince him that she's unhappy, that she deserves more. But if that doesn't work, option 3, take him out of the picture, for good. My pulse roared in my ears. Sophie let out a strangled noise, her hands gripping my arm. He was thinking about. Lena's face had gone pale. Holy shit. Aaron had planned to get rid of me. I had thought this was just about Sophie. That Aaron was some pathetic, lovesick idiot who had let his obsession spiral out of control. But this was dangerous. He was more than obsessed. He was unstable, and he had considered eliminating me if it meant getting what he wanted. I turned to Lena. We need to go to the police. She nodded immediately. We need a restraining order. Now. Sophie was still frozen, her grip on my arm so tight it hurt. What if he's still watching us? That single thought sent a shiver down my spine, because Aaron had been planning this for years, and now that we had uncovered his secret, I wasn't sure he'd just let it go. Suddenly, Lena's phone buzzed. We all jumped. She hesitated before picking it up. Her face drained of color. It's him, she whispered. I could barely breathe. Aaron had been silent since he left. Not a single word, until now, and the text he had just sent, it made my blood turn to ice. I know you found it. But it's not over. Not yet. Lena's hands shook as she held up her phone, Aaron's chilling text glowing on the screen. I know you found it. But it's not over. Not yet. A heavy silence fell over the room. Sophie clutched my arm, her breathing shallow. Lena swallowed hard. He's watching us. I felt a cold prickle crawl up my spine. The house was dark except for the dim glow of the laptop screen. The realization hit me like a freight train. Aaron knew we had gone through his files, which meant he was nearby. I shot up from my seat, my adrenaline surging. Lock the doors. Now. Sophie bolted toward the front of the house while Lena ran to the back. I sprinted to the windows, peering outside. The street was eerily quiet, but that didn't mean he wasn't out there. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. The operator picked up immediately. 911, what's your emergency? I forced myself to stay calm. We have a potential stalker. His name is Aaron Whitman. We have evidence that he's been watching my wife for years. And now, he just sent a message that makes us think he's outside our house. The operator's tone became serious. Is he armed? I clenched my jaw. I don't know. But we just uncovered files that suggest he might be dangerous. The operator responded quickly. Stay inside. Officers are on their way. I hung up, my grip tightening around my phone. Just then, Lena ran back into the room, her face pale. The back gate was open, she said breathlessly. It was locked earlier. My stomach dropped. Aaron was here, the shadows outside. Sophie rushed back, pressing her phone against her chest. I think I saw something outside, she whispered. I moved toward the window. My hands felt like ice as I peeked through the blinds, then I saw it. A shadow, standing at the edge of the yard, just beyond the streetlights, not moving. Not walking. Just watching. My pulse pounded in my ears. He's here, I murmured. Lena clenched her fists. What the hell does he want? I turned to Sophie. Stay here. Lock the bedroom door. No matter what happens, don't come out until the police get here. She opened her mouth to argue, but I grabbed her shoulders. Please. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she nodded. Be careful. She and Lena disappeared down the hall. I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, a fireplace poker, and turned toward the front door. The streetlight flickered, the shadow moved. A figure stepped forward. Aaron. He was standing at the end of the driveway, his hands in his pockets, his expression eerily calm. I pushed open the door but didn't step outside. Leave. Now, I warned. Aaron tilted his head. I just want to talk. You lost that chance the moment you tried to destroy my marriage. Aaron sighed, shaking his head. You don't get it, do you? I tightened my grip on the poker. Get off this property before the cops get here. Aaron smirked. You called the cops? He chuckled. Wow. I thought you'd at least be a man about this. I clenched my jaw. You need help, Aaron. That wiped the smirk off his face. His expression darkened. Help, he echoed. I need help. He took a step closer. You think I'm the crazy one? You think I'm the villain? My stomach churned. Look at yourself, I said. You've been stalking my wife for years. You were willing to ruin your own marriage. My marriage was already ruined, Aaron snapped. Lena doesn't love me. She never did. She just settled. Just like Sophie settled for you. Something inside me snapped. You're insane. Aaron smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. She deserves better. You think you are better? I spat. You, a man who took secret photos of her. Who manipulated everyone around you. Who thought about getting rid of me. Aaron flinched. Yeah. He knew exactly what I was talking about. You saw the files, he muttered. Yeah, I did. Aaron's fists clenched at his sides. His whole body tensed, and that's when I realized he wasn't here to talk. He was here to do something. The confrontation, I didn't give him the chance. The second he stepped toward me, I raised the poker and slammed it into the ground between us. The loud clang echoed in the night. Don't, I growled. Aaron's eyes widened slightly, and then red and blue lights flashed in the distance. Sirens blared. Aaron's face twisted. His entire body stiffened. He turned toward the approaching police cars, his breathing ragged. Then, without another word, he bolted. He ran. I sprinted after him, but the second he cut through the neighbor's yard, he vanished into the darkness. The police arrived seconds later, their flashlights sweeping across the street. He ran that way. I pointed. The officers took off, but I knew. Aaron was gone. For now, the aftermath. The rest of the night was a blur. The police took our statements. We handed over every piece of evidence we had, the files, the photos, the video, the text messages. Lena filed for an emergency restraining order. The police assured us they would find Aaron. That he wouldn't get away with this, but the thought that haunted me, Aaron was smart. He had planned everything for years. If he wanted to disappear, he could, and the scariest part, we didn't know when, or if, he would come back. 1 month later, Lena filed for divorce immediately. She changed the locks. Moved into a new house. Got therapy. She was done with Aaron. Sophie and I installed cameras around our home. Took self-defense classes. Stayed hyper-aware of our surroundings, but Aaron, he was gone. No social media updates. No credit card transactions. No sightings. It was like he had vanished off the face of the earth, until one day. A letter arrived in our mailbox. No return address. No postmark. Just a plain envelope. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a single piece of paper. 3 words. I'll be back.